I'm a 57-year-old man, and I've been married to the love of my life for 26 years. Let's call her Evelyn. We were college friends and had known each other for a decade before we got married. During those 10 years, we spent 2 years as friends, 1 year with me pursuing her, and the remaining 7 years dating. Some of those years were long distance because work took us to different cities, but despite that, our relationship endured. Evelyn wasn't just my wife and the mother of my children, she was also my closest friend since college. She understood me like no one else ever did. That's why her betrayal completely shattered me. About a week ago, Evelyn and I attended our college reunion. Every year, our college organizes a reunion for the class that graduated 35 years ago. It's a big event, featuring performances by singers and celebrities, and alumni look forward to it each year. This time, it was our class's turn, and we were all excited to see each other again after so many years. Evelyn and I were especially looking forward to it because we were one of the rare college couples who had married and stayed together for so long. We walked into the event feeling proud of the relationship we had built over the years. Little did I know, I was walking into a trap of my own making. We were having a wonderful time, catching up with old friends and reminiscing about the best moments of our lives. Everything felt perfect until someone approached us. Let's call him Martin. Martin had always admired Evelyn, and everyone in our class knew about his feelings for her. Evelyn was one of the brightest students in our class, and like any attractive woman, she had her fair share of admirers in college. I was one of them too. But unlike me, Martin wasn't the kind of guy who just flirted, took a chance, and moved on when the girl wasn't interested. He was persistent. He pursued Evelyn all through college and beyond, refusing to give up even when it was obvious she was in love with me. I had always been secure in my relationship with Evelyn and never let his behavior bother me. Martin, and everyone else, knew Evelyn was out of his league, but that didn't stop him from trying. I still remember the day he found out that Evelyn had married me. He actually sent me a text, claiming she had made a mistake. He even said he hoped I would take care of her as well as he would have. Evelyn and I just laughed at his childishness and delusional romantic notions. We hadn't spoken to him since that day until the reunion. When Martin approached us, I assumed that after 35 years, he would have moved on. It had been 26 years since our marriage, after all. But to my surprise, it was clear he was still fixated on Evelyn. He greeted us all with hugs, and we reciprocated out of politeness. However, Evelyn chose to shake hands instead, clearly uncomfortable with the intense way he was looking at her. I casually asked if he had brought his family to the reunion, but he told me he was single. He mentioned that he had been briefly married in his 40s but had gotten divorced. I responded with a polite, "I'm sorry to hear that," but his response caught me off guard. He dramatically sighed and said, "Well, yes, you should be sorry. You stole my love," followed by a burst of hysterical laughter. If this had happened when I was younger, maybe in my 30s, I might have confronted him about it. But now, as we were approaching our 60s, things like this just didn't seem worth the trouble. Besides, Martin wasn't the type of guy to be intimidating. He was more of a sleazy loudmouth, the kind of person you wouldn't even pick for a sports team. Even though everyone around us heard his little joke, nobody responded, and you could feel the discomfort in the air. We mostly brushed it off. However, Evelyn became noticeably quiet. Angela, our close friend from college, and I took Evelyn aside. We tried to lift her spirits, reminding her that Martin was nothing more than an old troublemaker and encouraging her to enjoy the night. Since Evelyn tends to overthink things, we wanted to help ease her mind. Out of nowhere, Martin approached us again. I suspected he had been keeping an eye on us the whole time. To our surprise, he apologized, saying he never meant to upset Evelyn. Instead, he claimed he only wanted to make her feel good, to let her know that even after all these years, despite the passage of time and the changes in her appearance, she still had an admirer. I couldn't stand his cheesy words and bluntly told him to back off. Evelyn also asked him to leave us alone, but he kept pushing, insisting that she forgive him so we could all enjoy the last great gathering of our lives. His words made me think. In a way, he was right. This was probably the last time we'd all be in the same place together. There was no point in holding on to past grudges. Evelyn must have thought the same because she ended up hugging him and telling him to let go of the past. After that, we moved on and joined the dance floor. The atmosphere changed, and we all started having fun again. Others joined in, and it turned into an enjoyable night. Later, I noticed Evelyn and Angela talking to Martin, who stood beside them, dancing in a goofy, exaggerated way. It was odd, but at least it seemed harmless. I felt relieved that the matter appeared to be resolved, and I figured we could look back on it as nothing more than an amusing memory. I kept an eye on them just to be sure Evelyn was okay. At one point, Martin leaned in and whispered something in her ear. She smiled and nodded. I assumed it wasn't anything inappropriate. If it had been, Evelyn would have reacted differently. That gave me the green light to relax and enjoy myself with other friends and classmates. About an hour later, I noticed that Evelyn and Angela were nowhere to be seen. At first, I didn't think much of it. We had all been mingling separately, catching up with different people. I had been doing the same. But after some time passed, and they still hadn't reappeared, I started to feel uneasy. I tried calling them first, but they didn't answer. I figured the loud music might have drowned out their phones ringing. But as more time passed, I knew something was wrong. I began searching for them, trying to spot them in the crowd. After about 30 minutes, Evelyn finally returned. But something about her was different. There were no obvious changes in her appearance, her dress was fine, her hair was still in place, but I had this overwhelming feeling that something was off. She looked like the same person, yet deep down, I knew she wasn't. Evelyn remained quiet and kept urging me to leave. Angela joined us shortly after, but she and Evelyn didn't exchange a single word for the rest of the night. I assumed they had argued about something since they avoided making eye contact. I repeatedly asked Evelyn why she seemed irritated and why she wanted to leave early, but she stayed silent. I had wanted to stay until the end of the party, but Evelyn insisted we leave. She remained silent the entire journey home, which took over an hour. I kept asking if she was okay, but she just said she was tired and needed rest. That response didn't sit right with me. She was usually full of energy, and seeing her upset without knowing why worried me. I asked if it had anything to do with Angela, but she simply said no, and didn't explain further. Assuming she was just exhausted, I let her be when we got home. While most of our friends were posting happy pictures from the evening, chatting on social media about how much fun they had, and lamenting that this might be our last reunion, Evelyn slipped into bed with her eyes closed. I got the feeling she wanted me to believe she was asleep. Why do I say that? Because it was almost 2 a.m. when I finally went to bed, completely exhausted. I fell asleep the moment I lay down. I don't know how long I had been asleep when Evelyn suddenly woke me up. She was in tears, resting her head on my chest. I held her close and gently asked if she was feeling emotional about reuniting with old friends, but she didn't respond. She just kept crying. I held her tightly, trying to comfort her since she wasn't saying what was wrong. I let her cry, hoping she would feel better. When she finally stopped, she confessed something that left me stunned. She admitted that she had cheated on me with Martin. I was at a complete loss for words, unable to even ask her anything. I just sat there, frozen in shock. My mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. The last time I saw Evelyn that night, she was dancing with Martin and Angela along with the others. Then, the three of them disappeared for about an hour. When Evelyn returned, she had looked upset and insisted on leaving. Now it all made sense. Angela knew what had happened, and she was furious with Evelyn, which explained her cold demeanor. I still couldn't bring myself to speak, so Evelyn, seeing my shock, began explaining everything on her own. She told me that while they were dancing, Martin kept apologizing for embarrassing her earlier, especially after she had rejected him so many times. He showered her with compliments, claiming that in all his travels, he had never met a woman as extraordinary as her. Evelyn said that in her intoxicated state, she started believing his words and fell for his apparent sincerity. He then asked if she would take a walk with him. At first, she declined, but he persisted, saying this would be their last meeting, and that she deserved to hear his true feelings. She wanted to hear what he had to say, so she eventually agreed and went for a walk with him on the college lawn, looking for some peace and quiet. Once they were alone, Martin confessed his lifelong love for her, calling her the most incredible woman on earth. She recounted all the things he said, but the essence was the same. He had never stopped loving her. Evelyn admitted that she was drunk and, in a moment of weakness, she let herself believe him. While they walked, he took her hand, and at that moment, she said she felt an immense burden lift from her shoulders, making her feel strangely comfortable. I won't go into further explicit details of what she shared with me about what happened, but she told me everything, absolutely everything. She even admitted that her guilty conscience kicked in while they were in the middle of the act, and she pushed him away. My mind was in a daze, my body numb. She nudged me, desperate for some kind of reaction, but I remained silent. I just asked her to give me a moment. She kept crying and apologizing. Eventually, I told her to go to sleep, that we would talk about it in the morning. She clung to me tightly, saying she was terrified of losing me. I simply closed my eyes and lay there, replaying everything in my head over and over. Then, I remembered something that suddenly made sense. Martin had given me a strange, unsettling grin after Evelyn returned from their encounter. At the time, I hadn't paid much attention to it, but now I understood. That was his triumphant smile. That was the moment he finally won after all these years. A surge of anger and disgust built up inside me. I wasn't even sad yet, I was just furious. The thought of sharing a bed with Evelyn became unbearable. After hours of crying, she had fallen into a deep sleep. Meanwhile, I was restless. I couldn't just lie there. So, I quietly slipped out of bed, packed my laptop, wallet, and other essentials into a backpack, and left our home. I loved that woman. We had been married for 26 years, and I couldn't imagine a life without her. We had a family, we had children, but I couldn't stay. I knew her too well. If I had stayed until morning, she would have found a way to convince me to stay, and I wasn't sure I'd have the strength to resist her. So, I left. I checked into a hotel and blocked her number. Then, I blocked her on all social media. By the time the sun started rising, I had finally managed to fall asleep. But around 8 or 9 a.m., my phone started ringing nonstop. It was my children calling. Evelyn and I have 2 kids, a 24-year-old son and a 21-year-old daughter. They both live on the same college campus. Now, after reading so many stories, I realize I made a rash decision by ghosting Evelyn that night. I should have thought ahead, planned. I couldn't bear to pretend in front of her. The thought of Evelyn cheating on me was the last thing I had ever expected, so I had never considered how to handle such a situation. When my children called, I had no plan for what to say, but I needed to speak to one of them before they reported me missing to the police. I chose to call my son, as he was usually more composed and mature than my daughter. I told him there was no easy way to break the news, so I just said it outright. His mother had cheated on me the night before with her former lover, or admirer, or stalker, or whatever you wanted to call him. I explained that I needed time to process everything. He was completely shocked to hear that his own mother had done such a thing. He knew we had a strong and loving family, a marriage that had always seemed unshakable. Now, that image was shattered. Our children, along with our relatives and friends, had always admired our close-knit and resilient family. He couldn't wrap his head around the fact that his mother could betray us like this. He kept insisting that there had to be some misunderstanding. He repeatedly asked for details and wanted me to explain everything in chronological order. But I knew that going through all the painful details would only break him before he even had a chance to start his own life. I told him I wished this were all a bad joke, but it wasn't. His mother had confessed to everything. He's 24 and has experienced heartbreak before, but this was different. I knew this was hitting him in a way that nothing else ever had. I asked him to promise not to tell anyone until I was ready. Then, I sent a text to my daughter, telling her I was stressed about work-related issues and would be out of town for a while. That put an end to the phone calls. So, the situation was as follows. While my daughter believed I was away for work, both my son and Evelyn knew that I had separated from her. In the days that followed, I spent time online looking for the best lawyers and searching for a way to handle this situation. That's when I came across an online community where many men had gone through the same thing as me. I read about how they had planned their revenge, exposing their cheating partners and confronting the affair partner. I understood their anger, I truly did. But revenge was the last thing on my mind. Despite everything, I still love Evelyn. And I would be lying if I said I could destroy her life in retaliation. I don't want to, but I also know I can't be with her again. Reconciliation is simply not an option. I have no idea how I'll navigate this or if I'll ever truly recover. I have so many responsibilities, my work, my children, my assets. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer for the next day to figure out my next steps. I promised to update once I had more clarity. Hey everyone, thank you for all the support. While reading your comments, I realized I left out some important details. Both Evelyn and I were management consultants, but in our late 40s, we left our full-time jobs. Evelyn pursued her long-time passion for writing, and I started working as a business consultant for startups. Since I'm self-employed, I don't have a fixed workplace. Someone mentioned concerns about Evelyn trying to find me at work, but since I either work from home or visit different client offices, she hasn't been able to track me down. As I mentioned before, I'm approaching 60, and for years, Evelyn and I had been planning for retirement. We had been saving up to buy a beach house in the countryside and were planning to make the purchase next year. We had even shortlisted a few properties and were in discussions with the owners. Luckily, we hadn't finalized anything yet, otherwise, things would have been even more complicated. Ever since I ghosted her, Evelyn has been desperately trying to contact me. The day after my first post, I met with my lawyer. He advised me to inform my children about the separation, given that they were adults. We also discussed the division of property, and I decided to split everything equally between Evelyn and myself. No, my retaliation won't involve taking away Evelyn's share of our wealth. She's entitled to half of it, and she's earned it. She's also entitled to this separation, which she, too, has earned. I know Evelyn very well. She might even be willing to give up her share of our assets if it meant saving our marriage and keeping our family together. While the divorce paperwork was being prepared, I met with my children. I asked my son to bring my daughter to a restaurant without telling her that I would be there. He agreed. The moment my daughter saw me, she became emotional, bombarding me with questions. One of the first things she asked was whether I was cheating on Mom, since she knew I had cut off contact with her. She was visibly upset, and it hurt me to see her like that, but I had to stay strong. I reassured her that I wasn't involved with anyone else, then gradually revealed the truth to them. Although my son already knew about Evelyn's infidelity, he wasn't aware of my next steps. My daughter was devastated. She had been living with Evelyn for the past 15 days since I left, and she had no idea what was really going on. She hugged me and apologized for being angry with me. Both of them asked if I could consider giving our marriage another chance. But I made it clear I was moving forward with the divorce. They both broke down. Watching my children in pain was heartbreaking, but they understood my decision. They promised to support me through this difficult time. I assured them that I was separating from their mother, not from them. My daughter told me that Evelyn hadn't been eating or sleeping properly. She was constantly switching between crying and nervously pacing the house while trying to reach me. She even drove to several of my clients' offices, asking about my whereabouts. But they all told her the same thing: I hadn't been there in weeks. When our daughter asked Evelyn if something had happened between us, since this was the first time I had ever disappeared like this, Evelyn didn't respond to our daughter's question. Instead, she locked herself in her room, crying and moaning. I asked my daughter to stay with her mother until the divorce was finalized. I could see their sorrow slowly turning into anger whenever we talked about their mom. I could tell they felt betrayed by her as well. I understood. It wasn't just my loss. They had lost something too. Our family had been shattered, and there was only one person responsible for it. However, I didn't want them to hate their mother. I insisted that they continue to support her. A few days later, I received a text from Martin asking about Evelyn. He said that if I was planning to divorce her after finding out about her infidelity, he was willing to take her. I simply replied that Evelyn was a free woman and could make her own choices. Then, I blocked him. I was sure he had only messaged me to provoke me, but I felt no anger toward him. I refused to play into his tactics. I didn't marry Martin. I didn't love or trust him. That was Evelyn, and she was the one who betrayed me. That's what hurt me the most. I'm not insecure. If she wants to be with him, she can. I don't care. The divorce papers were supposed to be sent out today, and I was still waiting for my daughter to call me with Evelyn's reaction. I'll provide an update once everything is finalized. In the meantime, I still have a lot to take care of: my assets, my retirement, and, most importantly, my children's well-being. Hey everyone, I know it's been a while since my last update. I apologize for that. I had a long list of things to handle. First and foremost, my divorce has been finalized. When Evelyn received the divorce papers, she didn't take it well. She completely broke down. Until that moment, she had been living in a delusion, convincing herself that I was just angry and that once I calmed down, I would come back to her. That illusion shattered the moment she saw those papers. She insisted that my lawyer arrange a meeting with me, but he refused. He told her she was getting half of our assets, which was more than she deserved. She responded by saying she didn't want the money, she just wanted me. She asked for one meeting before signing the divorce papers. She was confident in her ability to change my mind. She knew that if she had even one face-to-face conversation with me, she could persuade me to reconsider. And she was probably right. If I had met with her, I might have caved. I still loved her, and seeing her in that state would have been unbearable. But I couldn't set aside my self-respect. She took me for granted. She tore apart our family. For what? I couldn't live that way. My daughter urgently asked to meet with me. She told me that Evelyn's condition had worsened to the point where she had to be hospitalized. She had fallen into a deep depression and was refusing to eat, take medication, or even drink water properly. She was placed on a liquid diet because she had completely stopped eating. I know that some of you might think I'm heartless for not showing more concern. You might be wondering if I ever really loved Evelyn, given my apparent indifference to her deteriorating health. My response is simple: have you ever been betrayed? If not, then you can't possibly understand the pain I'm going through. To say that I loved and cherished my wife would be an understatement. I practically idolized her. I was her biggest supporter, her biggest fan. We were together for almost 3 decades. She was the mother of my children. And you know what? Martin was partially right. Finding a woman like Evelyn is rare. She is intelligent, talented, empathetic, everything you could want in a partner. That's why I always treated her with the love and respect she deserved. And how did she repay me? By betraying me in the worst way possible. I never imagined in my wildest dreams that she would cheat on me, let alone with Martin. A few days after Evelyn received the divorce papers, Angela reached out to me. She asked how I was doing and inquired about Evelyn. I told her that we were in the middle of a separation. She wasn't surprised. She already knew why. Later, she called me again, and during our conversation, she asked how I had found out about the affair. I told her that Evelyn had confessed to it. Angela expressed her regrets and said she had tried to warn Evelyn about Martin. She had advised her not to go with him, but Evelyn ignored her. Then, Angela told me something that made me even more sure that I had made the right decision. Her version of what happened that night was slightly different from what Evelyn had told me. According to Angela, she and Evelyn had been happily dancing when Martin joined them and started making advances toward Evelyn. He whispered something in her ear, which Evelyn claimed was an apology. Angela was immediately uncomfortable with how Martin was acting and tried to intervene, but then she noticed something. Evelyn seemed to be enjoying his attention. When Martin suggested going for a walk, Evelyn hesitated. She looked at Angela as if seeking her opinion. Angela strongly opposed the idea. Everyone knew how unsettling Martin could be. But after some time, Evelyn excused herself and left with him anyway. Angela wasn't too concerned at first. After all, Evelyn had seemed interested in going with him. She continued enjoying the party with their other friends, but at some point, she realized that Evelyn hadn't come back. Worried for Evelyn's safety, she went looking for her. And can you guess where she found them? In the changing room of the college swimming pool. But Evelyn told me they had just gone for a walk on the lawn. Angela had just revealed that Angela caught them in the act, and they only stopped when Evelyn noticed her approaching. So, it wasn't Evelyn's guilty conscience that put an end to it, it was Angela interrupting them. Up until this point, I still held some pride in Evelyn for at least owning up to her mistakes and confessing them to me right away. It gave me a sense of closure, despite how devastating her betrayal was. I believed her when she said she got carried away because of alcohol and that her conscience had stopped her. But now, it was clear, Evelyn didn't cheat because she was drunk. She cheated because she wanted to. The college swimming pool was at least a 15-minute walk from where we were, and the changing rooms were deep inside the facility. You don't just end up there by accident. It was a deliberate decision on her part. After sharing her side of the story, Angela asked if I could ever see myself giving Evelyn another chance to rebuild our relationship, given that Evelyn had confessed and been completely honest about her mistakes. The thing is, Angela didn't know that Evelyn's confession was different from what she had just told me. And I didn't bother to clarify or answer her question. Despite Evelyn's miserable state, she had still lied to me. That's when I lost all remaining respect for her. Meanwhile, my children informed me that Evelyn's condition was getting worse and that she was on the brink of self-harm. When I heard this, I called Angela and told her about my previous conversation with Evelyn, the one where she gave me a different version of the story. I asked Angela to visit her and have an open conversation, because I knew Evelyn was keeping everything bottled up, and it was causing her immense suffering. I also told Angela to let Evelyn know that I now knew the full truth about that night and that I had no intention of forgiving her or taking her back. She needed to understand that harming herself in hopes of reconciliation was pointless. After all, I knew her, didn't I? Angela visited Evelyn and later gave me an update. While Evelyn was still weak and struggling with depression, my daughter mentioned that she was doing considerably better. Additionally, Evelyn had finally signed the divorce papers. That was a huge relief for me. My plan now is to finish my pending work and go on a solo journey. I've abandoned my previous idea of settling down in one place because I know that would drive me insane. I acknowledge that I haven't handled this situation as perfectly as some people in this community who have faced similar circumstances, but I did the best I could. Let's see what the future holds. I'll keep you all updated. Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. It's been a year since my last update. I wish I could say time has flown by, but for me, it hasn't felt that way at all. I spent the first few months in a motel, then rented a condo for a while until my divorce was finalized. As for my work, I slowly transitioned to clients with whom I could work remotely full-time, just as I had planned. Regarding the money Evelyn and I had saved for our retirement home, she received 50% of it, and I split my half evenly between my 2 adult children. I have no need for it, and they are responsible enough to put it to good use. As for Evelyn, she is still undergoing therapy. Angela keeps in touch with her and occasionally checks in on me as well. She recently shared something about Evelyn that completely caught me off guard. Now, keep in mind that this information is coming from Angela, who still supports Evelyn, so take it with a grain of salt. But she has no reason to lie to me. Despite all my claims that I knew Evelyn well, even after her betrayal, what I heard made me question whether I ever truly knew her at all. I always thought of Evelyn as a strong woman with a resilient mind. But it turns out that loneliness took a toll on her. She started talking to Martin again, and at first, he acted as if he was still in love with her. But as soon as he found out about our divorce, his behavior changed completely. He essentially ghosted her. Evelyn was heartbroken when she realized Martin had stopped communicating with her after she told him the divorce was official. She reminded him of all his grand declarations of love, of how he always claimed he wanted to be with her no matter what. But it turned out he had never meant a word of it. He had only been flirting with her for a casual, physical relationship, and once he got what he wanted, he was done. He told her bluntly that he had no interest in marriage or an emotional relationship with her because she was too strong-willed. For those who know Evelyn, it's almost impossible to believe that she actually begged Martin for a relationship. She had never stooped so low before. Everyone knew Martin was a sleazy guy. Martin finally revealed his true nature when he admitted that he had only been interested in a fling, while Evelyn had been seeking emotional comfort. He even mentioned that he already had a live-in partner and was happy with that arrangement. All of his supposed love and admiration had been nothing but lies. When Evelyn confronted him about it, he ended the conversation with a cruel remark, one that completely broke her. He taunted her, implying that he had Martined her. He told her that for someone as intelligent as she was, she had been surprisingly easy to deceive. That remark destroyed her. She had lost everything, her marriage, her family, and now even the man she had ruined her life for. The last update I got about Evelyn was a few weeks ago. Since I moved out, my daughter had been staying with her, trying to help her cope with her depression. But after living with her for a year, my daughter finally realized that she could no longer stay. Evelyn, who was once emotionally strong, had completely changed. Evelyn has transformed into an insecure and erratic individual who constantly seeks attention and the presence of others. She has also become delusional and disoriented. She has turned into a controlling and possessive mother, bombarding our children with calls and messages if they don't respond immediately. She even insisted that my son move in with her until he got married, but he declined. She has been pressuring my daughter to spend time at home instead of going out with friends or taking vacations. But my children are not kids anymore. They are adults now and can't be restricted. Whenever my daughter tried to address Evelyn's intrusive behavior, Evelyn would break down and express her fear of losing them, especially after losing me. My children reassured her that they had no intention of abandoning her and were doing their best to help her cope with her depression. However, they also warned her that if she continued to be so controlling, they might have to reconsider their support. This led to heated arguments, with the children accusing her of not supporting them during her most difficult times. This behavior was unfamiliar to me, and my children were just as confused. Eventually, they had to confront her, telling her that it was her own actions that had destroyed what was once a happy and loving family. What used to be a harmonious and safe environment had now become fractured and distorted. It was difficult for her to accept that her own children held her responsible for everything. 2 weeks ago, my daughter moved out of the house. She told me that she had tried her best to help Evelyn, but she couldn't put her own life on hold to take care of her mother. I believe my daughter made the right decision. She needs to move forward with her life, and Evelyn needs to regain control of her own. Some people might take satisfaction in seeing their cheating ex-wife in misery, especially in their younger years, but I don't feel any happiness in this situation. I genuinely feel sorry for her. Her poor choices have condemned her to a lifetime of suffering. I just hope she can rediscover her former self, the confident, strong woman she used to be, the one who didn't need to rely on people like Martin for emotional support. As for my own journey, I've spent the past year living in 4 different countries, exploring new cultures, enjoying diverse cuisines, and immersing myself in entirely new lifestyles. It has been an incredible experience. At first, I was disappointed that my retirement plans had to take a different path. I had always envisioned spending my golden years in peaceful harmony with Evelyn. But now, I've found satisfaction in embracing different cultures and ways of life. I've had the privilege of meeting incredible people in different parts of the world. To clarify, I haven't entered into any new relationships, nor am I actively seeking one at the moment. I'm open to whatever the future holds, and I'll update you all if anything significant happens. Hello everyone. I apologize for not providing updates over the past few years. The truth is, not much noteworthy has happened in the last 2.5 years, aside from my extensive travels to over a dozen countries and my renewed passion for painting. Initially, I started this thread to share my story about my cheating wife, and updating it with my travel experiences didn't seem relevant, so I refrained from doing so. However, something happened recently that prompted me to write this update. Last month, after 4 years, I saw Evelyn again. This reunion happened because of my son's upcoming wedding. Yes, my son has found the love of his life and decided to get married. He called me 2 months before the wedding and told me he wanted Evelyn and me to meet the girl's parents together. At first, I was hesitant. I suggested that I could just meet them at the wedding, but then I realized that this wasn't about me. This was about fulfilling my responsibility as a father. The girl's parents kindly hosted a dinner for us a week before the wedding. Although I hadn't confirmed my attendance, I decided at the last moment to go. Seeing Evelyn in this context was somewhat difficult for me. If it were up to me, I would have preferred that only one of us attend. Still, I understood that I needed to be there for my son. When I arrived, Evelyn seemed surprised to see me. She looked different. There was something in her eyes that suggested she had changed. She greeted me with a polite smile, but I could tell she was tense. Over the years, she had always maintained her long, thick hair, even as we got older. But now, she looked as if she had aged more than expected over those 4 years. Interestingly, they seated us next to each other at the table. I suspect our son hadn't told them that this would be our first time seeing each other in years. To others, it probably didn't seem like an issue. She remained silent throughout dinner, but once we had a chance to talk privately, she commented that I looked healthier and happier. I acknowledged it and told her it was because I had cut all the toxicity out of my life. For a moment, she seemed caught off guard. She quickly glanced around, checking if anyone had overheard us. She then asked if I was in a relationship, but I evaded the question, telling her that my personal life was none of her concern. During our conversation, I barely made eye contact with her. I focused on everyone else at the table instead. After dinner, when it was time to leave, I hugged everyone goodbye, but when I reached Evelyn, I simply gave her a nod and told her to take care. I don't think she expected that. She even stood up as I was saying my goodbyes, as if she thought I would acknowledge her differently. It happened quickly, so I don't think it was too awkward for the others. Surprisingly, my interaction with Evelyn was uneventful. She seemed either intimidated by me or too anxious to start a deeper conversation. Maybe she was overthinking it. Maybe not. Either way, I didn't dwell on it. After leaving the gathering and stepping outside, my son walked with me and offered for me to spend the next few days with him. I declined, assuring him that I would call. I then drove to my hotel. By the way, I don't have a permanent residence anymore. I'm mostly out of town, and when I'm in town, I stay in a motel. Transitioning into a nomadic lifestyle after being a family man for 26 years was challenging, but I've grown accustomed to it, and honestly, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Aside from my family situation, I have another update. I now have a companion. 2 years ago, during my visit to Tokyo, I met Victoria. She's 52 and had recently left an abusive relationship. She was savoring her first solo trip when we met while hiking up a mountain. At the time, neither of us was looking for a romantic relationship, so we became friends. After our time in Tokyo, I was headed to South Korea while she was going to Thailand. We stayed in touch for 6 months, and eventually we started planning our travels together. For the past year and a half, we've traveled to over 8 countries together. We became travel companions, taking things slow. We didn't rush into anything physical or emotional during the first 2 months of traveling together. From the start, we were clear we weren't interested in marriage. Right now, we just want to enjoy the experience of traveling and exploring the world. My children knew about Victoria, but they chose not to tell Evelyn, fearing it might trigger another wave of depression. After arriving at the hotel, I called my son to explain why I had declined his invitation to stay with him. I told him that Victoria had accompanied me to town, and I couldn't leave her alone. I also told him that I wanted Victoria to attend the wedding. He was excited but also nervous about how Evelyn might react. I emphasized that Victoria should be at the wedding because she is my partner, and she should meet my family. My son added my daughter to the call to get her opinion, but mostly so the 3 of us could discuss it together. She agreed with me. Victoria should meet the family. The wedding was a week away, so I used that time to give Victoria a tour of the city, since it was her first visit to Kentucky. On the wedding day, as soon as we arrived, I noticed Evelyn staring at me. She was visibly upset when she saw me holding hands with Victoria at the venue. I had already warned Victoria that Evelyn might behave unpleasantly, but she assured me she could handle it. This was the first time I saw firsthand just how controlling Evelyn had become since our separation. She rushed toward us and grabbed my wrist, trying to pull me aside. I firmly told her that I didn't want a private conversation with her. She asked if Victoria was my girlfriend or if I planned to marry her. I replied that it wasn't any of her concern and asked her to leave us alone. Guests were arriving, and some had already noticed Evelyn's tears and anger. She insisted that she didn't care what anyone else thought. She needed to resolve this now. My daughter stepped in and tried to calm her down, but Evelyn refused to go with her. We pointed out that she was causing a scene at the wedding. She loudly responded that she didn't care. At that moment, my usually gentle daughter became a force to be reckoned with. She didn't just lose her temper, she gave Evelyn a stern talking to that I never expected. In a hushed but firm tone, she said, "Mom, yes, you were supposed to walk into the wedding on Dad's arm and be with him. But you chose to be with some random guy. So, either accept it and move on right now, or I will make sure you're kicked out of this wedding before it even begins." I almost wanted to step in. It's natural for a parent to intervene when they see their child upset. But my daughter was stronger than I ever could have been in that moment. She pointed her finger at Evelyn, and I could tell she meant every word. I felt Evelyn's grip on my wrist loosen. I saw her face quiver as she let go of me. For 3 long seconds, she just stared at me. Her expression changed from anger, to betrayal, to sadness. She didn't say a word, but I could see the storm of emotions in her eyes. Then, she walked away. She didn't even introduce herself to Victoria. On a positive note, my daughter later apologized to Victoria, who then hugged us. I reassured her that there was nothing to apologize for. My daughter is strong, and I'm proud of her. I could see she was emotional when she said, "It's on her, Dad. We've suffered enough. She needs to move on or leave you alone." Evelyn had made life miserable for everyone. Yet, for years, she had still expected sympathy and support from some of our friends. Because of her choices, my children no longer have a family home to gather in for special occasions, and I acknowledge my responsibility for that. Throughout the rest of the wedding, Evelyn grew increasingly upset that our children were supporting me. She either stood off to the side or appeared more excluded than a mother of the groom should have been. She didn't even join us for the family photos. A few days ago, Angela called me and mentioned that Evelyn had taken all of this as a major blow to her ego. Seeing me move on while she remained single only made it worse for her. I told Angela that my children and I were done with Evelyn's drama. She's on her own now. She can do whatever she wants. I just want to enjoy the rest of my life in peace. I'm considering staying closer to my kids and providing them with a family home to gather in, even though they're grown. This wedding made me realize that a new chapter of life is approaching. I might become a grandparent soon, but I won't be sharing that with Evelyn, and I'm perfectly fine with that. We'll see if Victoria is willing to settle down when the time comes. I want to express my gratitude for all the advice and experiences shared by so many of you. I hope you all remain loyal and true to your spouses, not just for yourselves or your partners, but for your children. Life is good, and there's always more to enjoy. Take care. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you soon.